Good morning. Today on Spotlight, meet Paula Herbert, the president of the Michigan Education Association. She hails from the Clinton Township area, where she was a K-12 music teacher in the Fraser school system. She's a graduate of the University of Michigan School of Music, and she was elected to head up the third largest teachers union in the U.S. in September of 2017. And later, ABC News political analyst Matthew Dowd on the crowded field of Democrats as they get ready for their first presidential debates. It's Sunday, June the 23rd. I'm Chuck Stokes, and this is Spotlight. And welcome to Spotlight. Our guest today is the fourth female president of the organization that started way back in 1852 in Ypsilanti and now is headquartered in East Lansing. And we're glad to have you. Paula Herbert.
Great to be here.
Thank you so much for being our guest on Spotlight. You're the leader of 125,000 members of the largest single employee union in the state of Michigan. That's got to be sort of like wrestling a bear every morning.
Well, it's got its issues, but I'm happy to do it. It's one of the proudest moments I ever had was being elected the president of the Michigan Education Association. I'm very proud to represent our members.
Serious organization, serious topic, serious agenda and priority for this state, according to all the leaders in power now. I think a lot of people would look back and say Michigan used to have a wonderful reputation for being one of the top education states in the nation. We were envied everywhere. We are now ranking towards the bottom in so many different categories. What in the world happened?
Well, the underfunding of public education has been grossly not looked at and hasn't been addressed in over a generation. You know, we have been 50th in the country for increased funding for public education in this nation, in Michigan, over the last 10 years.
And when you hear people say, oh, it's the fault of the teachers, that probably really gets your temperature up.
Well, you know, we have the most incredible workforce in the state of Michigan, but they don't have support. They haven't had support from the legislator in their funding. They haven't had support from the legislator in their policy making. They haven't put teachers and those classroom educators at the front line being listened to about what they need to help the children of the state succeed.
And Madam President, why do you think that is? Because everybody, if you talk to the average person on the street, nothing's more important than their child. And everybody says education is their top priority because that's the future. But then somewhere in there, there's a disconnect.
Well, I think one of the problems is we all love our school, but it's that school that has a problem.
Always pointing the finger
always
somewhere
pointing
else.
the finger. And so my teachers are great, my principals are great, the superintendent of my school does the best that they can, but those schools aren't doing their job. And we have that priority feeling about our schools. We love our schools. We send our children to those schools. And so we want the best for them. So there's not an awareness that if one school is failing, if we're not funding all schools, then every student doesn't have the opportunity they need.
I was just recently up at the Mackinac Policy Conference. You were too. If there's one thing that we heard everybody saying was we have to make education in Michigan a top priority again. We have to get to the point where we are a top 10 state again, and that education is broken across the state, not just in the large urban areas. If you talk to Dr. Vitti in Detroit, he says that. If you talk to Sandy Brewer, leader of the Detroit Regional Chamber, not just the Detroit Chamber, he says that. When I talked to Bill Pink, who's president of the Grand Rapids Community College, he said the same thing.
Right, when we went to Proposal A, if we had fulfilled the promise of Proposal A with any amount of fidelity, if we had really invested, kept up with cost of living, and did all of the things right, and did not raid our school K-12 public education funding in the state. We would be in a place where we're not right now. We'd have adequate funding for our students, but we didn't do that. We took the monies out of the school aid fund to fix the roads. Just recently in the lame duck in December, they took money out of the school aid fund to fill a need for helping fix potholes in the state of Michigan. That's not right. We're sacrificing our children. We don't have any children to spare in order to fix the infrastructure. And the infrastructure everywhere in Michigan is crumbling, not just the roads, but in our schools, in the way we fund public schools. And we cannot afford to put our children in harm's way anymore by not funding schools the right way and really keeping the money that's meant for public education in public education. That's what Governor Whitmer's budget proposal will do.
You just recently had a major rally in Lansing. You have another one coming up on the 25th. What's the point? What are you trying to get across?
What we're trying to say is the governor has proposed the biggest significant increase to public school funding in a generation, and Michigan students deserve it. And our educators deserve the support of the legislators by putting their money where their mouth is. If they believe that education is a priority, then fund public education fully. Make sure that we're doing right by our children. Make sure that our educators get the supports that they need to do everything that they can to make a student successful in their classroom.
All right, we need to take a little break. We will hurry right back with the president of the Michigan Education Association. We'll talk about teachers, what teachers are feeling, what teachers need. We'll also talk about parents and the role that they play in all of this. And of course, we'll talk about that budget that they've got to hammer out. We'll be right back. Stay with us. And welcome back. We're talking to Paula Herbart. She is the president of the 125,000 member Michigan Education Association. Madam President, I recently talked to a young teacher and I said, okay, I'm going to interview the president of the MEA. What do you want to know? And this is what she said. Want to know, when are teachers going to get paid more? And when will there be less state testing going into their evaluations?
Well, we did a survey of over 17,000 educators just recently as part of our Launch Michigan initiative that we're working with. And one of the things that we found out is, number one, they don't like the standardized testing model that has been implemented by the state as a way to prove accountability for teachers, that they're frustrated by that they're having to teach to the test. So we have been working diligently to say to educators, you know, we need multiple measures to make sure students are successful, not just a test. You know, teachers create a test. We're big fans of tests. But what we know is that students learn in so many ways, and so we have to challenge ourselves to find out about their knowledge in many different ways, just not a test. The second thing is we need to do better by our teachers. These are highly educated individuals. Starting off, teachers some places in the United States make way more than they do in Michigan. In Michigan here, it's anywhere between $32,000 and $40,000 a year as a starting salary. Now that's not right. These students are coming out of college with debt that's over $50,000, $60,000. They can't even afford to keep their loans and their insurance and all of these things. And then we're saying, now you have to go back to school. And we should do that. Teachers want to get the best possible education that they need to ensure that they're giving the best to their students. But we need to be able to pay them a livable wage. And in Michigan, that's not happening.
I'm hearing that this is a problem. Can't even live in the community, afford to live in the community in which they teach, but yet we want to say it's all about community, it's all about a village, it's all about a neighborhood?
Right. I mean, one of the things that we find is that particularly in Birmingham, Bloomfield Hills, these teachers can't afford a house in that community because while they have great salaries, it still isn't the average salary of that community. It's well below the average salary of that community. And so it takes away from their being fully engaged in what that community needs and wants for their students. And one of the things we need to remember is that educators, whether you're an educator in the classroom or you're an educator in the kitchen or a bus driver or a custodial maintenance person, these people want to be a part of their communities, but if they can't afford to live there, they can't do that.
You favored the recent Senate plan that came out a little more than the House plan, and of course I guess you like what Governor Whitmer has proposed the most?
Love Governor Whitmer's plan. $2.5 billion added to the budget, with most of that going into public education, over $500 million in additional funding to public education, and more importantly, additional funding for those students who most need it. Students at risk, students who have special education needs, and CTE programming. This is key, that fundamental formula of foundation granting that assesses a student's needs and gives them more if they need more.
What is it about the Senate plan that you like better than the House plan, and what is it that you don't like about the House plan?
Well, the House plan doesn't take into account all of these sorts of things that says we need extra funding. They want us to kind of stay the same and get a little bit more, but what they don't understand is that children need more who have more needs. We have students with trauma that are coming into our public schools that need extra care. They need extra supports in learning. They might come with deficiencies in literacy. They might not have prior knowledge. One of the things we know is so key in literacy is having prior knowledge. Have I gone to a zoo? Do I know what a farm is? Have I ever ridden a bus or a train or an airplane? If I haven't experienced those things, it's hard for me to read about them and learn about them. And so the Senate addresses those kinds of foundational needs, similar to what the governor's plan. But of course, you know, there's nothing that in my book that tops what the governor says, over $500 million more for students.
Your critics will say there's enough money, we're overtaxed now. It's not about the money, it's about the quality of education that we're delivering. Your response?
My response is follow a teacher for a day, walk in their shoes, see what they're experiencing. 35 students in a classroom, 37 students in a classroom, 28 students in a kindergarten room, and they're expected to teach them to read, to write, and more importantly, in kindergarten, we need them to learn how to be good people.
One quick question before we go to break, and I know time's my worst enemy. Meant to ask you about, all right, when kids come back in the fall, the third graders, this will be the first year in which we will follow them through that third grade year, and at the end of that third grade, because of the M-step, if they don't test well in reading, then by the 2016 law, they get to be held back. You're a fan of that?
Not a fan of that. One of the things that we know is we have to ensure that teachers have everything that they need to teach that child how to read. We haven't done that yet. And so we're going to punish a student for maybe what we as a society haven't decided as a priority by putting our money where our mouth is and giving those teachers the supports that they need to ensure that that student can have the experiences that they need.
But don't we need a measurement to say that they are ready, and if they can't read at that third grade level, then aren't we making a disservice to them and passing them on to the fourth grade?
Well, I think one of the things we need to say is, have they made any improvements at all? Maybe they've come to us with a kindergarten reading level, they're in third grade this year, and now they're up to a first 0.5 grade reading level. Have they made gains? They have. Have they made gains if they were in a second grade reading level and now they're at a third grade reading level, but they're still behind in fourth grade? At least they're making gains. One of the things we have to think is, what's more important? Saying they must be absolutely at this line and then maybe psychologically harming them by keeping them back, when instead we should be giving them the supports that they need to continue on the success and improvement that they might have already made.
All right, I got to rush to a break. We'll hurry right back with more questions. We'll talk a little politics when we come back. Stay with us. Are you optimistic that Speaker Chatfield, Majority Leader Shirkey, and Governor Whitmer will get in the room and hammer out a budget, one for education, that is fair and equitable and does what you want to get done?
I do. I am very hopeful. You know, I've met with Senator Shirkey. I met with House Speaker Chatfield. Speaker Chatfield was a teacher. He understands both the problems and the joys of being an educator. The Senate Majority Leader Shirkey has been very open to hearing what we're doing and very open to working with Governor Whitmer in terms of, let's hammer out a solution that's best for all students. I'm hopeful that that can happen, and we're going to do everything that we can, educators, boots on the ground, to talk to both of those gentlemen and the governor and say, keep at it. Our students are worth it, our educators are worth it, and we need to have a budget that helps set the priority in education.
This coming week, the first big presidential debate will take place. The Democrats, a boatload of Democrats, will be starting to debate each other. What is it you want to hear from these 22 some odd candidates out there?
Not only do I want to hear that education's a priority, because so many people say that, but I want them to have a plan. What are you going to do for our public schools? How are you going to ensure that public education, the backbone of our democracy, which secures an educated electorate, is at the head of the table, that we are in the forefront, that our educators who are in the front lines are revered, are really being put up as these people that do the common good and the good for our country that we have done for over 150 years in this country. Public education is absolutely a bastion of hope for all students across this country. I want to hear them say that.
Do you as an individual or as leader of the MEA, your organization, have a particular candidate of choice yet?
Not yet, but we'll be looking to hear what they have to say about public education, because that will make a difference for us, for my members, and my members are going to let me know exactly how they feel about those candidates, and then we'll go from there.
Final question. Everyone says they want Michigan to become a top 10 state again. Do you think that is realistic, and what kind of time frame do you think it'll happen in, if it'll happen?
Well, one of the things that I want to have happen in Michigan is to have it be the fastest improving state in public education. You know, we may not make the top 10 in 10 years, but what we can do is say we're improving by leaps and bounds year after year, because we're investing in our public schools and we're going to ensure that our students have everything that they need to be successful.
All right, Paula Herbert, thank you so much for coming in, and we'll keep tabs on you and the MEA.
Good. Thank you.
And coming up, we'll talk to my ABC colleague Matt Dowd about this first Democratic presidential debate coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. In a recent interview on Mackinac Island, Dearborn Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Dingell said this about the last presidential election and the one coming up in November of 2020.
You know, I knew very quickly last year, 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago, we had a problem with our candidate, and I love her. She's my friend. I want to see how people campaign. I want to see how they relate to people. I want to see how they treat people. I want to see people. I want to see how they relate to people. I want to see how they're doing before I endorse a candidate. I want to win in 2020.
So this week, the more than 24 notable candidates running for U.S. president as Democrats will begin sorting themselves out in the first of 2 scheduled televised debates. ABC's Matthew Dowd has seen his fair share of campaigns. I talked to him on Mackinac Island about this year's race. When you look at this crowded field, the end of the race is over 1.5 years away. Let's take the Democrats first. Huge field. Who do you see making it out of this race based upon what you can see now? And I realize things can change an awful lot.
Well, I'm one of the ones that think that there's a lot of people that we're not considering that are sitting down at 1% or 2% that based on the debates they go through could really jump through this.
Okay.
I think what you want to look at is what are the 4 or 5 candidates that are going to basically make it through the first states. That's really, you want to be in that 4 or 5. Right now it looks to me in that 4 or 5 that is likely to be there is Joe Biden is likely to be there. Bernie Sanders is likely to be there. Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris, 5th. And that 5th, if it was today, would be the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, Pete Buttigieg. But I think that's unknown at this point. And a lot depends on all of their performance in those first debates in June and July and where they go from there. But you really want to be in the top 5 coming out of Iowa and New Hampshire.
And are there a couple issues that you see absolutely uniting Democrats or giving great aid to any one particular Democrat in that field?
Well, the one big issue the United Democrats is the Democrats want to beat Donald Trump. So that unites their party, the Democratic Party, to a huge degree. And so I think the question becomes is how do you confront Donald Trump in the primary as you're running in the primary, and what do you do? But I also think the other thing that unites the party and unites it is what is your aspirational message? What is it that you want to tell Americans on January 20th, 2021 in your inaugural address? And what are you going to do about the country, as I said, in this time and moment in history What are you going to do to bring us all together, whether it's rural, urban, black, white, Latino, Muslim, Catholic, Christian? What are you going to do to bring us together? And so people want an answer to that question, but they also want to beat Donald Trump in the Democratic Party.
And the abortion issue. Do you see that uniting and galvanizing women on both sides in perhaps record numbers in the 2020 election?
I think you're going to see record number of vote for a lot of reasons. I think that's going to, it actually unites people on both sides of the aisle in the deepest red.
For and against.
For and against. I think, unfortunately, and this is where I fall, I describe myself as both pro-life and pro-choice, which I think most Americans do, which is yes, we ought to do things to lower the abortion rate in the country, and yes, we ought to do that, but ultimately, whose decision, and when you go through that difficult moment, whose decision ought that to be? Most Americans fall in the, yes, I want less abortions in the country, but I also believe that the woman has the right to make that decision in the end in consultation with their doctor. But that's going to be a huge debate in the course of this. And I'm hoping somebody enunciates a message that enables people to not just be labeled one or the other, because most Americans are in that middle ground.
President Trump has at least one challenger, William Wild, former governor of Massachusetts. Do you see him making any strong inroads at all, or do you feel like too much of a challenge to go against the sitting president?
It's very hard against this sitting president in the Republican primary because he's very popular. I think it's a smart move by a Republican to run, or more Republicans to run, to sort of enunciate what does it mean to be a Republican and where your principled stands and how that differs with Donald Trump. There may be other candidates get in depending upon where Donald Trump is over the next 6 months. And I think New Hampshire is the state to watch, because independents can vote in New Hampshire in either party's primary. And that's when somebody can upset the sort of establishment figure. John McCain beat George W. Bush in 2000 by 18 points in New Hampshire, even after he had lost in Iowa. And so I think it's very difficult to beat Donald Trump in the Republican primary, but watch New Hampshire and watch where Donald Trump is come December and November of this year.
And anytime we have seen an incumbent president challenged from within their own party, that usually does not bode well for them in the general election, even though they may make it out of that primary, but usually they are weakened and get defeated in the general. Correct?
Well, yes, and it's usually a sign, if somebody does that, it means they're weak anyway, right? And so they challenge them and make them weaker, but usually people challenge somebody in the primary, like Ted Kennedy did with Jimmy Carter in 1980, it means they're weak already. And so that's really a signal, I think, to voters is Trump is at 40 or 41% job approval. That's a weak position for a president to win re-election. We don't know what it's going to be, so that's what I think has encouraged the challenge. And there's a whole bunch of Republicans that don't feel like Donald Trump represents them.
That's it for this week. Special thanks to all of my guests. I'm Chuck Stokes. We'll be back next week with more newsmakers in the spotlight. We hope you have a great week.